Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Soffer. I'm the Member of Parliament for Sackville, Eastern Shore, Nova Scotia, and the Federal NDP's official Veterans Affairs critic. I'm joined today by my colleague Sylvain Equitas. He's also the deputy critic of the Federal NDP. He'll be speaking en français regarding our notes today. Also joined by Mr. Michael Blay of the Canadian Veterans Advocacy, and a couple of veterans here as well to support our concerns about what was recently said a week back in Vancouver at a court case between Equitas, which is a firm that has gotten together to fight on behalf of veterans regarding the new Veterans Charter, and the attorneys representing the Crown in terms of the discussion of what role and responsibility the federal government has towards its veterans. The reason we're here today is because we wish to specifically ask the government a very straightforward and simple question. Do you or do you not have a moral, legal, social, and fiduciary responsibility to care for those you put in harm's way? And before I start, I'd like to first of all thank Mr. Stephen Blaney, the former Veterans Affairs Minister, for his service to veterans, and also wish to congratulate Mr. Julian Santino and assure him that we in the NDP will work with him and his department in order to ensure that the lives of veterans, RCMP members, and their families are improved from this day forward. One of the concerns that we had in the case that Equitas is arguing regarding the new Veterans Charter, not just over the lump sum, but the benefit concerns, is the following, and I'll read this to you. The Honor of the Crown, it's called, and basically the lawyers for the Crown are arguing there is no jurisprudence which supports the use of the Honor of the Crown concept outside of the Aboriginal component, and that the plaintiffs have failed to plead any material facts which would lead to a fiduciary responsibility on part of the Crown. They also go on to say that if veterans are not pleased with the new Veterans Charter, they should be lobbying their members of Parliament, and that the courts are not the place to do that. Well, if indeed that was the case, you've got to ask yourself, Dennis Manouge, who pleaded successfully with McInnes Cooper the lawsuit of the assisted clawback, which resulted in about $888 million going back to veterans and for legal services. So we're very, very concerned when we hear lawyers representing the Crown, and we're paraphrasing right now, the fact that there may be no fiduciary responsibility on behalf of the government to care for those that they put in harm's way. And I just want to go back, and this goes all the way back to 1917. Men and women that serve their country, men and women that serve in the military and the RCMP, have a firm belief that when they are put in harm's way, that if anything happens to them, that they and their families will be looked after. That is called the unlimited liability, which means they can be ordered into very dangerous situations. We have always assumed that the government of Canada, otherwise the people of Canada, have a moral responsibility to their needs all the way to and including the headstone. In 1917, the Borden's Unionist national government made a further solemn commitment to those in uniform, and I'll quote exactly what he said. The men who sacrifice in endurance of the free institutions of Canada will be preserved and must be re-educated where necessary and re-established on the land or in such pursuits or vocations as they desire to follow. The maimed and the broken will be protected. The widow and the orphan will be helped and cherished. Duty and decency demand that those who are saving democracy should not find democracy a house of privilege or a school of poverty and hardship. That was in 1917. And so we're re-asking the government one more time, do you honor what the Prime Minister said back in 1917? And the reality is that the men and women who serve our country honestly, firmly believe in their fiber that if anything happens to them, there will be no questions asked, that they will be looked after according to the laws of Canada. And when we hear Crown attorneys arguing that there may not be a fiduciary or a social responsibility to care for those, except in the Aboriginal sense, there's an awful lot of veterans out there who become very, very nervous. So that's why we're here today, to ask the government that point-blank question. And if indeed the government says yes to our question, then we'd like to know what are the Crown attorneys actually saying in the court case against Equitas. And at this time I ask Mr. Sylvain Equitas to say a few words as well. Thank you.
Bonjour, en tant que porte-parole de l'opposition officielle, de porte-parole adjoint de l'opposition officielle pour les anciens combattants, il est mon devoir de soulever d'importantes questions d'intérêt public concernant le traitement de nos anciens combattants. L'affaire Equitas est présentement devant la Cour devant une cour en Colombie-Britannique et qui concerne le respect des obligations du gouvernement fédéral en vertu de la charte de nos anciens combattants nous inquiète grandement. Le gouvernement conservateur ne cesse d'utiliser nos anciens combattants à des fins politiques, doit maintenant répondre à cette importante question dans cette affaire. Nous aurons donc l'occasion de voir si le gouvernement était sincère dans sa volonté affichée lors du nouveau visage qu'il présente maintenant avec le renouvellement ministériel, ou si le nouveau cabinet se cache dans le même vieux gouvernement. La question qui se pose dans l'affaire Equitas, c'est de savoir si le gouvernement fédéral a l'obligation de fournir des soins aux anciens combattants et s'il y a des responsabilités fiduciaires, des responsabilités sociales envers nos anciens combattants. Nous aimerions donc savoir si le nouveau ministre endosse les propos qui ont été tenus par les procureurs dans cette affaire. Selon donc les témoignages d'anciens combattants préoccupés, les avocats de la Couronne ont donc plaidé dans cette affaire que le gouvernement n'a pas d'obligation et de contrat social et d'obligation fiduciaire envers les anciens combattants. Le devoir donc du gouvernement est de nature fiduciaire à notre avis, parce que l'obligation d'agir au mieux des intérêts de la société est une obligation de loyauté et de bonne foi. Nous sommes donc extrêmement préoccupés d'entendre des anciens combattants témoigner du fait que le gouvernement souhaiterait se départir de ses obligations fiduciaires envers ceux qui ont servi notre pays. Cette obligation donc a été assumée par les gouvernements au courant des 100 dernières années, mais les conservateurs souhaiteraient se réfugier derrière la nouvelle charte des anciens combattants pour se soustraire à cette obligation. Nous n'avons pas l'intention de laisser le gouvernement se départir de ses obligations de la sorte sans sonner l'alarme et lutter pour le respect et la dignité auxquels nos anciens combattants ont pourtant droit. Donc, nous demandons au gouvernement de se prononcer rapidement, à savoir s'il endosse les propos qui ont été tenus par ses procureurs dans l'affaire d'Equitas en Colombie-Britannique, à savoir s'ils ont un devoir moral, un devoir social et également un devoir fiduciaire envers nos anciens combattants qui ont si bien servi leur pays. Merci. Je vais maintenant laisser la parole à M. Mike Blais de la Canadian Veteran Advocacy.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Peter Stauffer and Sylvain Chacon and the NDP party for their unwavering support for wounded veterans, particularly in this case with the Equitas Foundation. The government has come forward. They have said they do not have a social contract. It is our job to remind them that yes, they do. And it's not a social contract. It's a sacred obligation. This obligation has been met since 1917. Did this government fail to respond to those who served at Vimy Ridge? Did they fail to respond to those that served at Passchendaele, Ypres, Amiens? Did they fail to respond in World War II when brave soldiers landed at Ficino, fought their way up through Italy, fought at little Stalingrad, aka Ortona? Did we abandon the obligation when our men and women landed at Juno Beach behind the scenes? Did we abandon the obligation when our valiant men liberated Holland from Nazi tyranny? No, we did not. Nor did we abandon that obligation when brave Canadian soldiers landed in Korea, fought at Capion, Chai Li, Hill 187, Hills 355. This obligation has been met and perpetuated by various governments since 1917, and only in 2006, under the guidance of this government, has the sacred obligation been abandoned. The fabric of this nation is under siege. We send our young men and women to war and peace. It is our sacred obligation to stand by them when they come home suffering the consequences of a parliamentary decision to send them into harm's way. We are asking the government to stand down on this ridiculous position, to accept the obligation that successive generations of Parliament have willfully embraced. We are asking Mr. Harper personally to fix this now. There is no reason for young men and women to go to the courts to fight for an obligation that has been provided to multi-generations of veterans who have served this nation and with pride, dignity, and great courage. We ask for nothing more than what our forefathers were provided. And that's what this lawsuit's all about. Our young men and women want the same standard of care as those that were provided in World War I, World War II, and Korea, and we're damn determined to ensure that that standard of care is provided by this government, or we shall work to provide or elect another government that will fulfill its sacred obligation to those they send in harm's way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And just to conclude on this, the Ombudsman in his blog yesterday had indicated regarding the improvement of the new Veterans Charter is the fact that all previous legislation regarding veterans had the social obligation or national obligation in it. The unfortunate part, and this is something where all of us then take responsibility, and the haste to get the new Veterans Charter through, the preamble for the social obligation is not in the new Veterans Charter. So we're immediately asking that the Government of Canada, working with us, to make sure that that is enshrined in the new Veterans Charter, and that the improvements that we've been asking to the new Veterans Charter for many years now, and from many different organizations and individuals, take place immediately to ensure that no veteran or RCMP member of their family falls through the cracks in this particular regard. So at this time, we'd like to just take any questions that you may have, and we thank each and every one of you for coming today. Bruce?
At the center of this plot is one country that's part of the It replaces lifetime savings. Is it your position, your veterans organization, that one country can get away with full pensions?
I firmly, honestly believe you. My personal belief on that is it should be optional in this regard. If you're a 58 or 59-year-old military person and you become seriously injured and you receive an opportunity of a lump sum of, say, $280,000, that is something that you may wish to look at. But if you're 21 years old and you're offered that position, I would say no, absolutely not. So one of the considerations should be the option of going back to the previous year.
The Canadian Veterans Advocacy has taken a policy on harmonization of this issue. We're very cognizant of the fact that veterans who served in World War II and Korea, who are being provided pensions at this time at a lump sum award, they want that pension. They want end-of-life dignity. They want to leave something for their children and family as they've had. But we also must be very cognizant of those who have served in Afghanistan, those who are young by definition, and who are raising young families and who, probably will need a security blanket for the rest of their lives. And that security blanket was pulled away without consultation, without telling anybody what was going on at the moment when this nation was entering the most serious phase of combat we've experienced since the Battle of 187 in Korea, May 10th, 1953. So, we believe that if we approach this with harmonization, if we listen to all veterans' voices, young and old, we can provide a plan through choice and an option that will satisfy all needs. The problem is we have to convince this government to step up and embrace this plan, or embrace a plan that will resolve these issues. And at this time, we're not there yet.
Let me also ask, if government position accept what they have in share, what your interpretation?
That's a very good question, and although I'm not a lawyer, that could mean to a number of things, where the government can say no, but we have no obligation to change the charter, we have no obligation to provide further assistance to anyone in this regard. We basically in that regard, you could say that the entire Department of Veterans Affairs is one big charitable organization in that regard, and we just don't want to go down that road, to be completely frank with you. So that's why we're very concerned about the comments made by the attorneys in this particular regard, because although not being a lawyer myself, we really don't fully understand what does that actually mean. And when veterans hear, or when they assume that the government may not have a legal obligation to care for you, that gets them very, very nervous. And that's why we're here today, to address this influence, to get the government on the record of what obligations they have when they put their men and women in harm's way. And they shouldn't. The one thing the attorneys are right, they shouldn't be having to go to court to get this. But Dennis Mnuchin's case is a clear example. Other people have had to go to federal court to get assistance. The RCMP members now, they're having a class action against the government in terms of their benefits, very similar to the system. Equitas, which is with a group of esteemed people from across the country, Speaker Milliken, Speaker Fraser, Great Bill Blakey, and many others. These are not fools. These are people who have carefully analyzed this and said to the government of Canada, we're not able to talk to you and get these issues resolved at the table. We have no other choice but to go to court. And that is a telling statement right there when veterans and their organizations have to go to court to fight their government in order to achieve the changes that they're looking for. And it's really quite telling. So on that question, it makes us very, very nervous what that actually does.
There's a bigger picture here, too, than just the veterans. The government's looking at this as an individual basis. They can use the excuse, I signed the dotted line. I got hurt, I accepted the risk. Yes, I did. My family did not sign the dotted line. They stood behind me for 15 years. They still stand behind me. Comments such as this, what is that saying to the Danish veterans there who were troops? They're looking at themselves now like they have nothing. So, roots have consequences.
I'd like to just say, it's not a matter, it's also a matter of there is also, Peter will say, we're getting nervous. We're not getting nervous, we're getting angry. When we went to war, when we signed to serve this nation, nobody told us we were going to be abandoned. Nobody told us they were going to change the game in mid-flight. Nobody told us that once we started suffering serious casualties in Afghanistan, that our government would turn its back upon us, that they would put the budget ahead of their sacred obligation to take care of those that have been wounded. Yes, we're angry, and yes, we are going to respond. The government says that we have to send delegations to MPs to change it through legislation. Well, the Canadian Veterans Advocacy was based just on this premise. And we will send many veterans, repeatedly, to every member of Parliament in this nation, as many times as we have to, in order to legislate the changes that are required to fix this mess.
And this time, does anyone have any other questions at this time? If not, thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup, and hope you have a good day.